Hey everyone, welcome to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. It is 2022, and in today's episode, we are going to be discussing our January series here at the church called Who Needs God? This series is going to begin this weekend here at the church, and as always, I'm joined by our senior pastor, Brandon Connor. We've got a special guest in the studio that we'll introduce you to here in just a second, so stick around. We've got a great conversation coming your way.
You're listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. The goal? To know Jesus a little better, so we can live like him a little more. And now, here's today's host, Wes Feldner.
All right, welcome to the latest episode of The Loop. My name is Wes, and I'm the creative arts pastor here at the church, and I've got Brandon Connor, our senior pastor. Brandon, it's officially 2022.
Ready or not, here it comes.
I guess, man. Did you have a good Christmas?
Had a great Christmas. Got a lot of time with the fam. Maggie was in from college, so that was great. But now we're ready to rock and roll into the new year.
Yes, it's the new year. Okay, so something that you said to me that's real interesting about this series that we're diving in January. You said this Who Needs God series is just as or more important than Christmas or Easter. Now that is a big deal because Christmas and Easter is a huge deal here at our church. But why would you say something like that about this series?
Yeah. I think there are times when you sense that God's going to do something, and because of that, you get a little bit more jacked up about it. When we sat down and we started planning our new book study, which is going to be the Gospel of John, we started looking at that first couple of chapters, and really in the first chapter, we said, man, there's an opportunity here for us to reach people who are far away from God, people who aren't followers of Jesus. Maybe they're unchurched, maybe they're de-churched, but we really believe that with this series, there's an opportunity to do that. And for us, that's a big deal. You know, Mosaic was started with a mission in mind, and the big idea was that we're going to go after the 180,000 on the Gulf Coast who do not have a relationship with Jesus and they don't have a church home. And for me, out of every series that we have done in the last 5 years, this is the series that I think we are explicitly going after that target audience in a way that we've never done it before. And so I'm really jacked about it.
That's awesome. It's a great way to start the year.
It is a great way to start the year, living on mission.
That's great. All right, so joining us in the studio today is a good friend of yours, Mark. Mark, say hello to everybody.
Hey, it's good to see you, Wes and Brandon.
Thanks for being here.
Welcome to the studio.
Absolutely. So Brandon, tell us a little bit about Mark and tell the folks why he's here today.
Yeah, so the new series that we're going to be doing in January is called Who Needs God? And this is one of those series that is designed with a very clear audience in mind. A lot of our series, you know, we are kind of saying, man, this is going to be relevant for people who are Christians, and this is relevant for people who are not Christians. Everybody should check it out. But this is one of those series where the target audience for us is very, very clear. We're going after people who might consider themselves to be atheist or agnostic. We're using this series to go after people who are skeptical or maybe even critical of Christianity. And so for me, I wanted to say in this podcast, yes, we want to reach that target audience. But to be completely honest, I don't feel like I'm the guy who needs to be telling an atheist or, you know, an agnostic, hey, you need to come to church. Right. Well, of course, the preacher's going to say you need to come to church. So I invited my friend Mark into the studio today because when I first met Mark was pretty honest about the fact that he was not a Christian. And we, over the course of probably the last couple of years, have had the opportunity to build a relationship together. I have a lot of respect for Mark. Mark is a very genuine and honest person, and he has been honest with me over the course of those couple of years about all kinds of things in his faith journey, about what he believes, about where he struggles, about what he doesn't believe. And he's a guy who I think doesn't just have a perspective that is very different than me. Mark is a guy who I think has credibility that I don't have in terms of having a conversation with people who don't share my faith with me. And so, Mark, I really do appreciate you coming in and just having a conversation with us as we kick off this series. I think you've got a voice that a lot of people need to hear. So thank you for being here. I do want to jump in and kind of start here. Mark, I know that we've had a lot of conversations, and I want to just start by letting you talk about those times in your life when you really didn't see a need for God, and those other times in your life when you felt like, man, I do see more of a need for God. Like, just talk about those different experiences and feelings and thoughts that you've had over the years.
Yeah, sure. It's well, first I'll say that it's good to be here with you, and I do enjoy our conversations, and yeah, no matter what people's perspectives is on it, it's good to explore that, and so you, if nothing else, have a deeper understanding of your own beliefs.
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's the idea that you don't know anything so much as after you've taught it to someone, and by having those sort of in-depth conversations.
So true.
So growing up, I did have experience to the church, but that really went away. And as a young adult, went pretty hard with atheism. That kind of came through college and learning more with education, and then just my own personal interests with. I think we've discussed reading Dawkins a lot, and Christopher Hitchens, and a lot of those folks that are very strident in their opposition to Christianity. Yeah. So no, there really wasn't any reason for God in my life. The world was a materialist place, and you had no need for that. There's, I guess, one of the things that I like to think about is, I think everyone in this room, there's a vast pantheon of gods in which you do not believe. What's one more? So. But there's also what happens to us in life, and as we've talked a lot about, I went through a pretty tough spot in my life. And during that time, the folks that were with me and kind of shepherding me through that, they were Christians, and they started bringing me here and introduced me to you, and it was something, to look at it from maybe the most cynical view. I was at a vulnerable point, and they saw that as a opportunity to bring this guy in and see. And obviously we had a lot of back and forth along those lines. It took a bit.
It was one of those things that even I was concerned about, because I even remember sitting in a conference room with you here at the church one day and saying, Mark, like, I want to have this conversation with you, but I need to separate faith from what's happening in your life right now. Because what I don't want is, I don't want you to come to faith and then this storm passes, and then as a very intellectual thinker, you look back on that season in your life and go, well, I was just in a tough spot. I was desperate. I needed God. And so in some ways, I even felt like with this guy, like, we need to separate what he believes from what he's experiencing and try to navigate that, because it was easy for the waters to get really, really muddy there.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And that is the case. The other side of that would be, you can only work with the situation you find yourself in, and sometimes that is maybe less than ideal. You just have to go with that. But there was that kind of turning point in my life where I could then see that maybe this is something I need to pursue further. So made some decisions about Christianity and was then baptized. And that was an interesting starting point. But it's gone through a variety of changes since. I think maybe the way that I would describe some of it is, a lot of people describe finding peace with Jesus and kind of a rock, and that seemed to be one of the things I was looking for. And that was something that was there for a bit, but then I really got to the point where maybe this isn't quite what it's cracked up to be. And that's not to say that it doesn't work for some people. We all have our own things we find comfort in life, or things we find strength in, and maybe that wasn't the thing for me. You could use a few biblical analogies. There's the story of the grain that's sown, and the stuff that goes in the field, it sprouts and does things. There's others that go in rocky places and maybe it sprouts and then it dies. And
Yeah.
so that was kind of one of the perspectives I was looking at it from is, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'm not in the right place where that works. But it's been a continuously transformative process. And through it all, I have kind of got to a point where I'm now more open again to that, because I think there is a lot of value in that.
Yeah, it's been interesting because I've watched you kind of struggle. We've had some really honest conversations in depth about the things that you're kind of scratching the surface on. And, one of the things that I appreciate about Mark is that we've always been able to talk honestly, and we've always been able to talk respectfully, even though we don't see eye to eye all the time. And that's one of the things that you really don't see in the world. It's almost like in the world today, hey, if we don't agree, then we're going to battle and it's going to get ugly. And it's like, no, like we've been able to maintain a relationship and in a lot of ways learn from each other and be able to dig deeper into these topics and just explore it together. So let me ask you this, Mark. One of the things I love about this series is going to be the title video that Miguel created. No one can see Miguel. He's on the other side of the camera, but what he did is he created a title video, and the title video has images of people who are just living life. And throughout the video, there's these little scratch marks over people's eyes. And when we talked about that video, Miguel and I were talking about how many people in life, their life is so good that they cannot see their need for God. And so I want you to talk a little bit about that. Like, why is it that you think so many people in the world today really don't see their need for God?
Well, I think there's a variety of reasons for that, and I can't speak to everyone's different things, but I can say that there's a lot of different options out there for when you're in a tough spot and looking at what your resources are for that, and then also just your perspective on man's role in the world and sort of a philosophy of the long term. So in that way, we're not necessarily as a populace indoctrinated with the tenets of Christianity the way it may have been in different previous generations.
Yeah, the world's changing.
And so that is kind of not the default fallback for a lot of people.
Right.
And for those that are, there's now a lot more options out there, so you can pursue other things. So, but not everyone gets to that point where they are really searching the depths of their soul, looking for whether it be a meaning to their life or looking for some sort of port in the storm. So they may just not get that. And but in my case, I kind of got there and then was looking at what there was out there.
Yeah. You used a word there that I think is really interesting. You used the word depth. You were talking about the depth of the soul, and it does seem like to me, and this is just my perspective, it seems like to me there are a lot of people who don't see their need for God because they're not thinking about the deeper things of life. I think there are a lot of people who live in the shallows. And so to go back to the analogy that you were using where Jesus talked about the different types of soil that seed is sown into, there's rocky and there's thorny. There is this picture of very shallow soil, and it's like it falls on that shallow soil, but it doesn't take root.
Right.
Because these are deep issues. This isn't, hey, who won the ball game this weekend? This isn't, hey, how's the weather? This isn't, hey, what are you doing for the holidays? Like, these are the deeper questions of life that are often discussed either in the context of a local church or maybe even in a philosophy class at college or in, a book that's, actually got some substance to it. And I think a lot of people in America today are just kind of living life and trying to have a good time and trying to make it through another day or another week. And they're not really thinking about the deeper issues of life.
So kind of along those lines, there's something that now off the top of my head, I want to say is referenced in one of Dawkins' books, and I couldn't tell you which right now. Mm-hmm. But the idea was this, is that life is like a garden, and it can be a very beautiful thing. Mm-hmm. And you don't have to imagine that there's fairies at the bottom of the garden to make that any more of a wonderful place to enjoy. And I think that as we've moved away from maybe a religious conception of man's role in the universe towards a more strictly materialist perspective, most people don't really think of an afterlife or heaven as a relevant thing. It just doesn't fit into their worldview. And that's something that, for myself, it's kind of a challenging conception. So that one of the areas where I think religion has traditionally found a good push is in that afterlife thing, and that's just not something that's relevant. The sinners in the hands of an angry God message does not resonate with people because that's it's just not what echoes with people today. Yeah. They're kind of rejecting that in some ways that idea that we're possessed by an original sin and are kind of required by default to seek that long-term salvation to get to heaven. Otherwise, you end up in some other place.
Yeah. Yeah. So, one of my questions for you today was, why is it that people's views on God change over the course of time?
Yeah.
And I think, one of the things that I'm already hearing in our conversation is that there are some times in life when we're living in the shallows and we're kind of life is good and we're living for the weekend and, we're talking about the things that don't matter, but then life gets hard. Like I heard you use that language, and then all of a sudden we're talking about the things that do matter. Yeah. And so maybe that's a reason that sometimes people are more open to the idea of God than they are at other times. But are there any other reasons that you think people's views on God change over the course of their life?
Boy, that's that's a lot of different answers to that. I can really kind of speak to myself, and that as I became in my late teens and then a young adult, my kind of conception of the world, a lot of that through reading Dawkins and similar, just changed, and no longer was there a relevance towards faith, but it just wasn't even a part of the conception of the universe. So why should I be concerned about that?
Yeah. And so some of it was an influence in your life that, whether it's a book and an author that you're reading and ideas that you're exploring or college professor, those are things that start to shape the way we think about these issues and whether or not they're really worth our time.
Yeah. And I couldn't tell you the verse, but I think there's something along the lines of when I was a child, I thought and spoke like a child. And as an adult, I became an adult and believed the things that adults do. And I think that's, for a lot of people, religion is sort of a childhood experience that is no longer relevant as you gain understanding in the universe. And there's a lot of things that kind of would have traditionally been under the purview of religion and God and explaining the universe and the origin of life that is now fallen pretty handily under the scientific realm and is explainable. So to what end do I need this God for anything? It looks like something for children to believe.
Yeah. Interesting.
Man, I love that you're here. I want to kind of pivot the conversation just a little bit. I want to talk specifically about the church because you spend a ton of time here at Mosaic, or you have over the last couple of years. And so I just want to know, and maybe just let the folks know that are listening or watching, why is it that you choose to hang out at Mosaic on a regular basis?
He's like, I have no idea.
I feel like I don't know that I hang out. I show up. Usually
but you're here. Yeah.
It's that's a good question. I guess the one thing is that I've found Brandon to be an interesting person to talk over things with.
Yeah.
And even when I've wildly disagreed with him on some things, he provides an interesting person to push back against and make me examine my own thoughts. And over time, he's somewhat grown on me. So
it's like a mold.
I was going to say like a wart that's growing. There you go. But no, I've gotten to know him, and so I think that really with any relationship, you start having that that interpersonal subjective experience that then you can use to have further and deeper conversations.
Yeah.
for me, it became kind of a good thing in my life. Come to church and hear this message. It doesn't hurt that you have a decent band.
Hey,
that's
there
going
you go.
on.
There we go. Shout out.
Yeah, I tried a couple other churches, and there's a few different
Sure.
sort of preaching styles and music styles, and for me personally, it's like I'm not really so much with the grandpa guitars
Sure.
and some of that older and more traditional church feel. I think, is Chad still the drummer?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Chad's usually up there rocking it on the drums. And that's good. And I enjoy Brandon's
That's
messages.
huge.
And that's sort of something that connects he's not going at it from, not that there's anything wrong with sort of an expositional style to preaching, but he's maybe tying it. I think we've talked about Kierkegaard, and you're tying it into maybe a more philosophy of life and looking for that meaning of Christianity in people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, when Jesus met with people, Jesus was able to look at their life and see what they were struggling with. And then Jesus was able to say, hey, let's go back to what God's word has to say. And let's talk about the implications of that for this struggle that we're all experiencing in life. And so he was great at that. And that's, something that we at least strive for, is to try to say, hey, man, is there anything in this timeless book that is timely for what we're struggling with today? So I hope so. I guess one of my questions is, I'm hoping that there are people who are going to listen to this podcast, and they are people who are not followers of Jesus. They don't even know if they believe in God. They may know that they don't believe in God. And so if there's anyone like that who is listening to the podcast, Mark, and they're a little bit intrigued about this series that's coming up, what would you say to them about this place, Mosaic Church?
I would say it's a very easy place to go into, and the message is one that resonates very easily. I think if you go to some churches, the sort of expositional style of preaching is going to have a more of a challenge, because it's going through verse by verse, and that's maybe something that doesn't resonate so well. Whereas a message that is more philosophical and applicable to everyday experiences, I think works well.
Good. Well, we try to make Mosaic a safe place where people can come and explore the claims of Christianity. One of my buddies, John, used to always say, it's a safe place to hear a dangerous message. And, that's what we want, man. We want people who are saying, I don't believe, but you know what? I'm in a place in my life where I'm not afraid to listen to other points of view and at least consider these possibilities. And so that's my hope, is that people find Mosaic to be a place like you have.
Yeah. Well, it's more than just Mosaic. I mean, really the crux of what we're talking about is the series content. And that's what we're hoping is going to draw people in, people that might have different ideas and beliefs that we do. Yeah. So, Brandon, I guess, why should someone who doesn't believe in God or see a need for him in their life, why would this be a good series for them to check out?
Yeah.
What would you say specifically to those people if they're listening to this episode?
Yeah, I think even though they may not believe in God, I do think that they would say that's a conclusion that I have reached and I haven't taken it lightly. They understand the gravity and the weight of that position that they hold in life. And so I would just say, hey, if you've got an entire lifetime to live on this earth, would it be worth 5 hours of your life to come and hear every single one of these messages and at least consider whether or not you've really landed on a position that you really want to hold on to until the day you die?
Yeah.
And it may be that 5 hours, it actually causes you or helps you to think through your position in a little bit deeper way. And, either you land a little bit more squarely on it and you go, yes, this is absolutely what I believe. Or you go, you know what, there were some things that were said that are really helping me wrestle through my beliefs in the same way it has been for Mark. And that would be my hope, is that people would come invest 5 hours of your life. It's probably the biggest question of your life. So drop 5 hours of your life and just be open to a conversation and a point of view that maybe you haven't considered before.
Yeah. Well, I'm excited about this series. Just a reminder for everybody that's listening, the series kicks off this weekend. It's called Who Needs God? And I would encourage you, share this episode with someone you know who maybe isn't even on the same page as you belief-wise. Yep. You know what I mean? Family members, coworkers, friends. Maybe invite them to the series with you. And remember that this is just a small taste of what we're going to be talking about over the course of the 5 weeks. It's going to be awesome. So I guess I have a question, Brandon and Mark. Any final thoughts? Any parting shots? Anything that we need to do to be preparing for this, or anything that we left unsaid to the folks that are listening to or watching this episode?
I mean, if people are interested and they want to jump into some reading, they could, look at John chapter 1. That's the chapter that we're going to be in primarily throughout this entire series. It's interesting as Jesus comes into the world, it's like, why? And so I want people to at least be reading for themselves rather than just listening to me, but read the content for yourself and start to think about it maybe in a way that you haven't thought about it before. There'll be some other things that we'll reference throughout the series that will just provide you with content where you can explore a little deeper. And so we'll be kicking that out on the weekends during those services.
Yeah. Mark, anything from you?
I think that going back to some stuff we had earlier, I think Brandon, you had a tough time getting a handle on how to approach me with some of this stuff, particularly in the early days.
Yeah.
And I guess what I would tell people that maybe have an antagonistic view towards it is you can start pretty small with things. And for me, one of the big things was, okay, how can my life be better by just taking the sort of example of the way Christ treated people, and how might that change some things in my life, and that perspective on that. And, the Bible has a lot of stuff in it, and some of it's kind of challenging. Do I really believe all this? But at the most basic level, it provides a sort of philosophical basis for a way to look at life. And I found that to be a very helpful thing. Yeah. And the rest of it kind of can build from there if it does. But I think it's useful to understand that there's maybe more to Christianity than what people they have a traditional conception of the church. Yeah. It can be an individually transformative process to try and become more like Jesus.
It really can. And, it reminds me that one of the other resources I'm going to be talking about in this series is a book by a guy named Erwin McManus. And he wrote a book called The Genius of Jesus. And he said, I actually wrote the book from a perspective of a person who doesn't even believe. But he said, it's interesting to me that if you look at the list of all the people who are considered a genius in the history of the world, Jesus isn't on the list. And yet he seems to have transformed the world in a way that most people have never done. And so I think Mark's onto something. There's some components to Christianity. Christianity's been vilified in our culture, and it's almost like people have thrown the baby out with the bathwater and have kind of just said, don't want anything to do with it. And this is a series I'm hoping opens people's eyes up to go, wow, maybe there's some things in here that are really worth my time because they add so much value and transformation to my life.
Yeah.
I know we've gone around about Nietzsche in the past before, and I think that's another kind of to emphasize that point is obviously he was stridently anti-Christian, and the book The Antichrist lays that out very, very thoroughly.
He's clear
about his feelings, but ultimately one of the ideas of strength and power that he saw with the Roman Empire was kind of overcome by Christianity. And so there is something that, although Christianity does come from a different perspective, it does have some power to it to wear away at things and change the world.
Wow. That's great.
Yeah. Mark, thanks so much for being here,
dude,
man.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming and hanging with us today.
Yeah.
So we've all got our homework. We've got a little bit of reading to do in the book of John. Yeah. And make sure that you're sharing this episode with folks, inviting folks to attend. Remember, the series Who Need God kicks off this Thursday at 7 p.m. and then we'll have services again Sunday at 9:30 and 11. So if you've already got somebody in mind as you've been listening to or watching this episode, just go ahead and give it a share and shoot it on over to them and say, hey, here's something that I think you should check out. Let's have a conversation about that, or maybe you can join me for church this this weekend here at Mosaic. So we want to say thanks to all of you as well for being with us. Thanks for hanging. And we'll see you guys this week for our brand new series, Who Needs God? Thanks so much. Have a great day.
You've been listening to The Loop, a podcast by Mosaic Church. For more information, visit us online at mosaicgc.com.